Yes.
Francois Hollande said that we must be careful not to import this kind of violence into our countries. Does that apply to South Africa? And do you think that this is a war that is being fought across the world in every community already?
Well, where's it been imported into South Africa? We don't see violence. We don't see attacks on the Jewish community. Yes, there's outrage. Yes, there might be some people who stupidly raise a kind of anti-Semitic statement or so. We've seen that even from some ANC people. It's immediately come down on. There's no such exportation of violence. There are anti-Semitic elements all over the world who would take advantage. But I want to tell you something about where the source of this violence is, because I had first-hand experience in France. I was in Paris for that demonstration. Incidentally, it was called, amongst others, by a Jewish group, which is also very important in what we saw in Cape Town, because it's uniting people, it's not dividing people, Muslims, Christians, Jews, etc. What happened a week before this particular demonstration of Paris, there was an earlier one, and something called the Jewish Defense League. They are banned as terrorists in the United States. They allowed in France, and they are absolute hoodlums and thugs. They attacked a peaceful demonstration, and young people responded by attempting to deal with them. They hid behind the police lines. That was the violence. So it's this extreme element of that kind. And I would say, I know there are extremists all over, but I would say let's focus in on the Israel situation, the Palestinian situation. Israel is responsible for state terrorism. It's got its groups, such as the one I've referred to, although that group's banned in Israel. But there are these hooligans there, and the Israeli government is becoming increasingly right-wing extremist. Netanyahu and his cohorts show that. So let's keep that in mind in terms of what's taking place. Demonstrations are overwhelmingly peaceful, disciplined. We've seen that in our country. And I hail those Jewish people who have involved themselves. That's the way to deal with anti-Semitic sentiments, because the rest of our people see that it's not simply a question of if you're opposed to Israel and its policies, that's anti-Semitic. It is absolutely not.
We see at these marches there seems to be an increasing thought process around Jewish, not Zionist. Can you just maybe qualify that statement by marches that you've interacted, what that means and what that means to you?
Well, Zionism is a doctrine, and Zionism comes from 19th century movement of looking for a homeland for Jews, seeking that way out in relation to anti-Semitism. At that stage, and even later in this country, there were Jewish groups who were socialist inclined, and they were the ones who initially debated heatedly with the Zionists and were absolutely hated by them and were attacked by them. So the question of Zionism, and Stephen Friedland is coming on soon, he's a great expert in that. But yes, I'm born Jewish, and I was affected by this in terms of the community I grew up in. But I can tell you that growing up in South Africa gave me another identity, and that's identity of the country that I'm born in. And the question of dealing with something like anti-Semitism or any ethnic group, you deal with it through becoming part of the popular democratic movement of your country in order to ensure that all people are treated equally.
Finally, Mr. Caswell, you mentioned earlier about South American countries withdrawing their ambassadors and so forth. During the US-Africa summit last week, our president said that this might be a counterproductive step at this stage. What are your views on recalling the Israeli ambassador from South Africa?
You see, I'd say to Jacob Zuma and to the ruling party, ANC, that as in our struggle, we never said to the world, deal with apartheid and with the ANC on an even-handed basis. I mean, that is nonsense. There is people who are struggling for justice, and those who repress. Repression, incidentally, as we know, gives rise to resistance. And as the ANC, we welcomed governments, breaking off ties, supporting BDS, boycott, divestment and sanctions, as a way of bringing about change.
Yeah.
The ANC and our president should be leading this process internationally, not coming up with mealy-mouthed statements such as he did. That is absolutely immoral and wrong. And it defies what Mandela has said about our need for solidarity with the Palestinians. It's not an even-handed thing. We must choose sides for justice, for a proper solution, for all the people's security. But that question, Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims, Christians, they need to resolve themselves without the kind of support that Israel gets from the United States and other countries, which means that Israel conducts itself and its murders with impunity. South Africa must take the lead in this respect.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, former Intelligence Minister, Mr. Ronnie Kasrils, also a well-known anti-apartheid activist, actually one of the pillars of the anti-apartheid struggle.
I would say there's no supplements or minerals, something that you can take will completely prevent cancer.
Although vitamins help the body produce and use energy, they do not provide energy themselves because they don't contain calories. Supplements also cannot be used to replace foods or make up for poor dietary habits.
Cases in Liberia are currently doubling every 15 to 20 days, and those in Sierra Leone and Guinea are doubling every 30 to 40 days.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sello Mutau. Watch Health Talk every Saturday on SABC News.
President Jacob Zuma has condemned the violence between Israel and Hamas, calling it a global embarrassment. He was speaking at the conclusion of his 4-day visit to Brazil for the BRICS summit. In the latest developments, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a UN request to halt hostilities for 5 hours on humanitarian grounds. The Israeli offensive aimed at halting rocket fire into Israel by Gaza militants has killed 224 Palestinians so far.
The issue of Palestine and Israel, it has to come to an end. It's actually an embarrassing thing globally that at today's world, when we have gone through the last World War, when we have established very powerful international organizations to help resolve issues, there is an issue that is unresolvable. It's actually a difficult thing. Why should we? Why should we have people dying, innocent souls, children and women, in this day and age, when we say we don't want people to die for sweet nothing?
Tensions continue to rise in the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This week alone saw more than 200 lives lost in Gaza as a result of Israeli airstrikes in Palestine. We are joined this morning by Israeli Ambassador Arthur Link, who has also been summoned to the Department of International Relations to explain his country's actions. Ambassador, welcome to Newsroom.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start off with the latest reports this morning that you have met with the Department of International Relations.
Yeah, I did meet with him yesterday, but you know what? That's what I do all the time. That's what diplomats do, and why it's great that countries have relations so that they can talk to each other.
Now, could you please just put us in Israel's position on this matter?
Yeah. Over the last week, over 1,000 missiles have been aimed at Israel's cities. 1,000. It's amazing. People in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem and in Ashdod can't live normal lives. Every few minutes, an air raid siren goes off and they have to go into hiding, just like South Africa would do if it had a similar situation that a neighbor was attacking it. Israel has to protect its civilians.
I read an article earlier this week that, and you were also quoted as saying that the horrific desire for there to be a balance of pain, the imbalance in Hamas' death wish versus Israelis' life wish.
Well, it's sadly true. We the Palestinians, our neighbors, they're not our enemies. They're our neighbors. They deserve better. The fact is that Hamas rockets are putting their own civilians in danger. They shoot them from homes, from schools, from near mosques. Nobody should do that. They need to be able to stop the rockets so that Palestinians, so that the citizens of Gaza can have a better life. The rockets have to stop.
Can you also just clarify the reports on the South African ambassador apparently being recalled back to South Africa?
Yeah, that's not my understanding. My understanding that he's here on holiday and on leave, and it's summertime in Israel. But obviously, you have to talk to the South African government about that.
Would you just take us back to the ceasefire negotiations with Egypt this week, where it started on Monday, where it is now? What is the situation there?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Egypt came to the two sides and said, we think that there should be a ceasefire to stop the violence so that the people, both on the Israeli side and the Hamas, on the Gazan side, can be protected. Israel immediately said yes. And Hamas said no. It's strange. They say that they're under attack, but they could stop the violence, and they chose not to. It's sad, actually.
Some Hamas, the groups, they talk about not meeting their demands. What are their demands? And what happened during these negotiations with regards to their demands?
Well, Hamas demands is that there's no state of Israel. They don't believe that there should be a two-state solution, the idea that Israelis and Palestinians should be neighbors. They think everything is theirs and we should all just leave and go somewhere else. Well, that's not going to happen. Israel is the one Jewish state. We have obviously also Muslims and Christian citizens that all live within our democracy, and we're not going anywhere. We believe that there should be peace and a two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians, and we all deserve better. Hamas is holding their own people hostage. It's terrible. It's terrible. My neighbors deserve better.
What's your response to, on social media, has been a buzz this week, Israel being called an apartheid state?
Well, it's wrong. We're not. We're a democracy with a diverse citizenry, that everyone has rights. Different communities and minorities are all in parliament, and on our Supreme Court there's no connection. But I am active on Facebook and on Twitter, and I'm happy to chat with anybody who wants to talk to me.
I do know you're quite active on social media, and we're going to be looking at some tweets just now. Just before that, I want to ask you, why then do you think this comparison is being made?
Well, the comparison is wrong. It's used as an epithet, as a mean word to just throw out there, but there's no comparison. It's not accurate, and I think that what it really does is it shows disrespect to the people here who fought in the struggle in South Africa and who made this country a better place, to misuse that word, to use it in a lesser way.
Then let's look at a couple of those tweets. I know we've got them. It's questions that came in through the night. I understand, yes, here we've got one of them. What are the Ambassador Link's view on Hamas' demands? They are, by any standards, reasonable demands. Do you agree?
Well, the demand that there should be no state of Israel. Well, you know what? Or the demand that we can't protect our own civilians. Any country has to protect its people. We don't want to hurt the Palestinian people. They're our neighbors. They deserve better. Hamas, it's interesting. Before we targeted places that are sending missiles off to Israel, we send warnings to the civilians and tell them to get out of the way to be safe. And Hamas's media is telling them to stay. Why would you put your own people in danger?
We've got another one. Does the Israeli ambassador condone the killing of 4 Palestinian children playing on the beach?
No, it's a great tragedy. They got caught in crossfire, and it's awful. And I really regret it. It's a great tragedy. Any loss of life, Palestinian or Israeli, is a great tragedy, and that's not what we're looking for. We think our people deserve better.
I know we've got one more, but this is not a question, this is more a comment. Ambassador Link seems to blame Hamas for this entire conflict, which began pre-1948. Hamas only comes into the picture in 1987. On that note, can you just take us back a bit in history? I understand, is it 1948 or 1947 that the two-state...
Well, in 1947, the United Nations decided to offer the Arabs and the Jews 2 states in the historical land of Israel and historical Palestine. The Jews agreed, and the Arabs said no. It's a shame. It was a historical opportunity for Palestine to come into existence so long ago, in the 1940s. And I think that we have to find our way, firstly, to stop the rockets, and then a way back to dialogue, so that there can be 2 states again, so that there could be a possibility for Palestinians to choose their own way, to live side by side in peace and security with Israelis who have that right too.
Now, there have been organizations and parties calling for your expulsion from the country and isolation of Israel. What is your response to that? And then just Israel's role in South Africa, what would that mean?
Well, firstly, the answer is I'm here talking to you this morning, and I'm going to continue talking to South Africans as long as I'm here in your beautiful country. I think, much more importantly than that, is we have lots in common. We have lots of shared needs and ways that we can help each other. Israel is an expert in agriculture, and in water use, and in technology, and in innovation. Those are all things that we can share with South Africa. And you know what? South Africa is a lesson to the world and to my region about how a problem that seemed impossible, seemed that it was insolvable, was solved. We can learn from that too.
Our new waterproof smartphone takes superior photos even in low light, has PlayStation 4 remote play and up to 2 days battery life. Don't settle for good, demand great. The new Sony Xperia Z3 series.
Demand great and get the waterproof Sony Xperia Z3 smartphone with a 20-megapixel camera for only 499 Rand per month on a smart small contract this summer. Power to your best summer in 20 years. Vodacom, power to you.
Zoom into Africa. This is South Africa. The president is Mr. Jacob Zuma. South Africa became a republic in 1960 and attained democracy in 1994. The population is more than 50 million people. One of South Africa's major languages is English. Monetary unit, the rand.
Over 20 years now, South Africa has just been one big construction site, building houses.
This is the only country in the world that provides free housing. The government has done very well in this particular area.
What are the challenges facing human settlements?
Most of the people who move into urban centers are looking for jobs, basically, and that increases the pressure in that particular area. We know exactly what needs to be done where and how it should be done.
They were also building houses for married staff, and you had the married quarters and the hostels. And all of that stopped. What happened?
Nothing has stopped, Mr. Mateza. We cannot solve the housing problems on our own in this country. We cannot wait for government as well.
It's a joint venture, if I were to put it like that, between the public sector and the private sector, particularly in the area of mines.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
Had there been harmony between the South African government and the Nigerian government, which came through in the latter stages, the bodies would have been repatriated quicker.
Now, we always get a lot of criticism as a public broadcaster, but just how far can media go in terms of reporting the facts?
Watch Media Monitor Sundays at 9 a.m. on the SABC News channel.
Humanitarian aid agency, the Gift of the Givers, is waiting for a final green light to travel to Gaza to assist with relief efforts there. Last week, the World Food Programme estimated that 150,000 people in the region were in urgent need of assistance. Now, SABC News will accompany the Gift of the Givers to the region. Today in studio, we are joined by Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, founder of the Gift of the Givers. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Morning. Thank you.
Just give us an update on the latest. I understand that we're waiting for the Egyptian government to get back to us and give us a heads up as to whether we can go in and you guys can start with the relief effort.
Yes, I approached international relations last week Monday. It was 9:10 at night. They were preparing for the budget speech. And amazingly, in 30 minutes we got a response. Tuesday we got another call from them to say this is a government priority. The president has mentioned it. The ministers have mentioned it. Gaza is a priority. We're going to help. On Wednesday, they called me to say, on Thursday, you'll have more updates. Thursday, they called me in. They called the Egyptian ambassador in. They sent our ambassador in Egypt to the Egyptian government. And our ambassador on Saturday in Ramallah spoke to the Palestinian Authority. On Monday, it was Eid, and Durko followed me up. And I keep making this joke. Normally, I have to run after Durko. This time, they're running after me. You know, they really on the case. They're amazing. I must thank them. They're doing a great job, and they're waiting for information. And that's why last night, all my teams got together in Johannesburg because they need itemized, the list of what's going on the planes. And we were sitting with that last night.
Now, we're waiting for the Egyptian government. Just tell us what the expectation is from the Egyptian government on your part. When do you expect things to happen, the green light to go ahead, and also what the doctors would be doing right now while they're waiting in Egypt?
Well, the doctors are not in Egypt yet. From past experience, we know, and from other medical teams that went before us, quite a few of them during the first 2 weeks stood at the border, couldn't get in, and had to go back home. And some people, by the time they got permission to get in, their days of leave were over. So they spent like 24 hours or 48 hours inside after waiting for about 10 or 12 days. So that's a waste. In terms of the Egyptian government, they said this is the blueprint. They gave us a paper and said you've got to follow all these rules. So Durko is working on it, and the condition is it has to come from the government of the country where the aid agency resides. So it has to be done through Durko. So Durko is the front member now, doing all that kind of stuff, and and we're trying to adhere to all those rules. And that comes through, of course, then we wait for them to say, now what is the problem for us to go through. But there's multiple facets to this. A medical team, a search and rescue team, a media team, an ambulance, medical equipment, medical supplies, and also supplies from other agencies in the world that have sent stuff on our name that's stuck in the airport in Cairo, which we also want to put as part of this list.
2 weeks ago on the show, we had the doctors just before when they were about to leave or getting ready. You had 75 medical staff at that time who volunteered. The number of volunteers I see have expanded over the last week or so. It seems as if there's no shortage of people who are willing to stop their lives to make a contribution.
It's more than 120 yesterday, and it's still climbing all the time. And what's amazing, these are very highly skilled specialists who will be ideal in this situation. Who do you take and who do you leave behind? I mean, they are committed, they're dedicated. But also we must give recognition to the non-medical volunteers. With no exaggeration, I can fill 3 plane loads of non-medical volunteers who want to go to Gaza to do something.
That's incredible. It just shows that the human spirit will triumph in the end over all adversity. Wanted to ask you about the information that you're finding on the ground now. What is the expectation once you get the green light? What will you be faced with? And also, what would be the needs of the civilians in the Gaza Strip?
Well, we are inside Gaza at the moment. From the day one, within 12 hours of the bombing, we've been supplying medical supplies that we could buy in Gaza and food that we could buy in Gaza. But that's limited. And also, it's not everything that you require for the situation. This is critical. They need medical teams because the doctors are washed on their feet. They're finished. They're exhausted. Secondly, the emotional and the psychological trauma, what the doctors are faced with. They need highly specialized equipment. And they need search and rescue teams. People are caught under the rubber. It's anxiety. Unlike other situations, here Israel is deliberately targeting hospitals, deliberately targeting schools, deliberately targeting civilians. One example, one lady that I work with has been to South Africa. She is doing the distribution for me on my behalf. In the last week, I told her, Allah, how's it going with the distribution? She said the first few days was fine, but now it's very difficult. I said, why? She said, Khadija went around to give out food to the people, as you asked. I said, who is Khadija? She said, Khadija works with us. So I said, what happened? She said she had a big yellow shirt on, big bright light saying humanitarian worker. She went in an ambulance. She was giving out food, and Israel struck the ambulance directly. So I said, what happened to Khadija? She said she's dead. So she said, like this, so many of our workers have been targeted. So it becomes very complicated. We even said, as a backup, we will use the UN school to put up a field hospital inside the UN school. How many schools have been targeted?
The UN school has been bombed overnight.
There's no security.
It seems.
And the hospital, Al-Shifa, we had worked there before. That thing got hit. So where do you put the people?
That's incredible and very scary to hear that's the level of assault on the civilian population within Gaza. Finally, Doctor, I wanted to ask you the plight of the people in Gaza. How do they, if they want to evacuate and move out, how do they do that? Because both sides, the border posts are closed. How do you escape from what the pictures that I see, these massive bomb blasts, from hell, really?
No, there's no escape. Same lady, Allah. She sends me a Twitter, this WhatsApp message, on the day of the invasion. She says, we are leaving our house now. It's now an empty house. and we are homeless, although we have a house. We have to move away because it's getting too dangerous here. We are going to a safer place in Gaza. So I asked, what is safer in Gaza? She said, no, there is no safe place in Gaza, but we are going to a safer place. And the areas where they went to, there's 220,000 refugees. And where they moved to, that's where the bombs are coming now, where the people are supposed to be in a safe place.
That's really incredible. It's really incredible to hear that humanitarian aid workers are being targeted by the Israeli military in Gaza, and that the people are really between a rock and a hard place. There's nowhere to go. They have to dodge the bombs, it seems.
The only conflict in the world, there is no border to escape through. The only conflict in the world, you are stuck all around. You cannot go anywhere. 1.8 million people, 47 kilometers long, 12 kilometers wide. The largest concentration camp on earth that's being bombed and people are being exterminated.
And it seems as if every square inch of Gaza is being bombed, or the plan is to bomb every square inch of the strip, by the looks of it.
Well, there's nothing much left there. You know, and remember, building material is not allowed into Gaza. So how are they going to build their homes again? Oxygen, life-saving oxygen is not allowed into Gaza. How are they going to breathe and survive in hospitals? Power plants are knocked out. There's no generators, there's no fuel. How do you do operations? People are going to die in hundreds.
Dr. Suleiman, it's really a heart-wrenching story you're telling us this morning, and it's really difficult to try and understand the situation that these people are in. But thank you for joining us and giving us this kind of insight. It's a much worse crisis than I think we even in the media are reporting on. We report on numbers, and those numbers never really hit home. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That is Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, who's the founder of Gift of the Givers, giving us a little insight as to what is happening in Gaza. All I can say is that anger breeds more anger. Hate breeds more hate. It's time for us to look at what are the alternatives. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the World Food Programme has estimated that 150,000 people in the region were in need of urgent food assistance. SABC News will accompany the Gift of the Givers organisation to the region.
Emergency food aid. Hundreds of thousands of Gazans are in dire need. It's aid the Gift of the Givers is hoping will go a long way to assist the Palestinian people.
People in Palestine want closure. They want their children that are under the rubble. They want to bury them. They want to put them in the grave. And that's why we thought that we can serve our purpose by taking the search and rescue teams in to help find bodies and to hopefully find live people also. So it's ambulance, medical team, search and rescue team, medical equipment, search and rescue equipment, medical supplies other than medicines, and medicines.
Things easily taken for granted like bottled water and canned foods are part of the consignment. Well, this organization is used to moving into conflict zones, but many are emotional about this particular trip.
As a doctor, but also as a father, I mean, I've got 3 children, and we're looking at the pictures that where the kids are affected. I think there's no one that's not touched by what's happening.
As the conflict rages on, homes and hospitals have been targeted. Despite calls for a permanent ceasefire to allow negotiations, rockets continue to light up the Gaza skies.
People are being targeted, being shot in the head. This is a massacre.
Calls are mounting for an end to the hostilities, and times are desperate. In Gaza, ordinary civilians are crying out for help. The South African medics are hoping to be in the region next week. Criselda Lewis, SABC News in Johannesburg.
I can confirm that those are genuine pictures that's been shot by SABC News. Now, for the past few weeks, social media networks have been engulfed in a war of its own as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues. Gruesome pictures of bloody children, women, wounded civilians have spread like wildfire under hashtags like Gaza under attack, Gaza under fire. But how many of these pictures are real? Some of them have been reported to be false. False reports have become ammunition in what's been called a propaganda war now on social media. News outlets like American publication Breitbart are hard at work exposing the fakes. It turns out that many of the photos that have been posted on social media were actually posted months, even years ago in different countries. Many of them, as I say, not even in Gaza, but during the Syrian civil war. Now today, We're joined by the Managing Director of Roy Africa, a South African-based media monitoring company, Tonya Kuri, to carry on this discussion. Good morning, Tonya. Thanks for joining us again.
Morning, Eben. Thank you for having me.
It's such an emotive story, and it's so difficult to consume what's happening. People being locked down in a compound and being bombed to smithereens. We see these pictures come out, and in a way, sometimes this is the only real connection that people have with what's going on the ground. But some of the photos that we're seeing are not real. Just talk us to the fakes and then the propaganda war that's going on.
Yeah, I think you used the right term. Propaganda war is definitely what's happening on the social media platforms at the moment. Eben, a couple of things. Firstly, this is one of the first wars where we've been given information via real live-time tweeting from civilians.
Yeah.
So it becomes even more emotive than it would be reading a news report. And, you know, some of the biggest keywords we've pulled out over the past few days are things like pain, pray, please. All these really strong emotive words are being used in relation to the crisis. But there are a lot of fakes out there.
Yeah.
And they are being used to align with a certain side or to invoke a certain emotion amongst the audience. Very difficult to ascertain what is real and what isn't real. I mean, from a media monitor's perspective, we did a lot of research over the past couple of days in leading up to this interview, and it's very difficult to determine what is not real and what isn't, what is real, you know.
One would hate to be so crashed about it. It's really, but who's winning this online war, as it were?
Well, I think both sides, like I said, the emotion is running very high. There is definitely a bias towards the Palestinians. And we've put a couple of hashtags on the actual social media search engine. We monitor over 200 million social media platforms, Evan. And we use the word Gaza, Israel, and Palestine in comparison. And we found, I think you can see it now on the screen, that the Palestine coming in at 28% of the coverage against the whole crisis, and Israel and Israelis coming in at 4.3%. But what is interesting is if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, and this is something new we've introduced at Roy, and this is automated sentiment tracking. So the amount of negative press, I mean, just look at the negative and neutral versus the positive on the left, on the right-hand side of the screen. Everybody that has something to say is not saying something good. Everybody's unhappy, Eben, and isn't that the state of the crisis that they're in, you know?
Now, in the online space, it's a bit of a free-for-all, it seems.
Yes.
What are the rules when it comes to this kind of fake photos and the monitoring of it and the propaganda that's being spread? Are there no rules? Is it literally a free-for-all?
Well, you see, with Twitter specifically, and that's where we're finding the majority of this conversation is going on. With Twitter specifically, Twitter as an institution completely divorces itself from Eben and Tonya's opinion.
Yeah.
It is a dedicated site to your opinion. You yourself are responsible for that opinion. So there aren't anything. There isn't anything Twitter can do to stop false reports. I think from a layman, if you're following this particular trend in social media, you need to use your head.
Yeah.
You know, firstly, look at who you're following. Look who is putting the message out. What sort of credible followers have they got?
Yes.
Are they being followed by news teams? You know, that's always a good place to start. You know,
celebrities and politicians, they love getting onto Twitter and putting their Save Our Girls hashtag on and so forth. How should people view this? I view it not in a very good light, because it simply means you're not interested, but you want to show that you
you're getting on the bandwagon almost.
You don't really care, but you
want to make a show of it.
You want to make a show of it.
Exactly. Like Save Our Girls was one of those very big instances where you saw a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon. But I think what is important, specifically from Twitter's perspective as a medium, is you have a direct telephone number. Tonya has a direct telephone number to President Obama.
Yeah.
And that's what I find the most amazing thing about
the thing I want to
medium.
ask you about, here we see the different countries reporting on Gaza in the last 31 days, especially here we have. Now, we see South Africa's got only 2.27% of the cake, but what's happening in the South African and in a way in the African space with this conversation that's going on online?
Well, I mean, we look at, you say it's only 2.2%, but we've made the top 10 countries in the world. This data set has been taken over 75 countries, and what you're seeing on the screen now is only the top 10.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we've come in at country number 7.
It's still a massive conversation if you look at the global numbers.
Conversation.
Yes.
And I think what's also may skew the stat a little bit is the number of the number of outlets in the USA that then impacts obviously on the amount of press that comes out of the USA. But it is interesting to see that South Africa is only 2 countries behind Israel on the reporting. Yeah, we are paying attention.
We're paying attention and we're involved, and we've got relief efforts going on there. We've got doctors going on there,
yes.
and the scary thing that's coming out is that when you speak to these people who are directly involved on the ground, like Dr. Suleiman a little bit earlier, he's talking that their relief effort is being targeted, and that is a concern. So what is the conversation on Twitter like in South Africa? Is it a very abrasive one, or is it a little bit more conciliatory?
I think the biggest focus right now from the South African perspective is the children. Everybody's talking about schools, about the child deaths, about babies being born with dead mothers and things like that. So that is a massive emotive part of our discussion at the moment, specifically here in South Africa. Also, there's an awful lot of referral to the years of apartheid and the certain, what could be construed as similarities in the policies. I mean, I don't know, and I'm certainly not an expert on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the South Africans are certainly very much involved in the conversation, Eben.
Tonya, I've seen some of the conversation going on, and we've had Israeli Apartheid Week in South Africa, so it's I think in a way South Africans feel that with our history we have to have some understanding of what's happening in Gaza, and in a way I think South Africans are very much a humanitarian nation and a guide on that front. We are the land of Nelson Mandela in the end.
Yes, exactly. They need a Nelson. They need a Madiba.
They do, but somehow I think that it runs a lot deeper than that. When you talk about religious issues in this space, it's more than religion. It's really far more than religion, really a fight. But people don't realize it's a fight about land.
Exactly.
It's very small pieces of land available, and the fight in Israel is about land.
And passion for the roots. You know, I have a Palestinian friend and I have an Israeli friend, and I had conversations with both of them last night, and what is interesting to me is the amount of passion in both voices, and the never say die attitude. You know, like, I don't know how this is ever going to be resolved.
Well, we hope that sanity will prevail in the end, and that we as a species would be able to say we are Earth and we need to intervene.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Tonya, for giving us the numbers online. All around the world, it's a conversation that everyone almost is involved in, celebrities and politicians. If they put their free Palestine or Israel under fire scenarios, send them a question. What are you doing? Are you making a contribution? Are you saving lives? What are you doing?
Art is a personal expression that evokes a flame from within.
Street art, it's a vast concept.
Dancing is one of the main art forms on the streets of Africa. Regardless of how it is done, the streets remain expressive. A passionate artist in the central business district of Johannesburg.
Yeah, I've been doing this it's been 7 years or 8 years now.
Brains lost control on what to do then. Words dispute in the mouth of a woman.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Inspire others to say no to drugs. Drugs can cause cancer and destroy your life.
You can lose everything. You can lose your friends. You will never be the same again. Drugs can kill you.
Alcohol can rob you of your future.
You can lose all your money.
They can make you infertile.
you will lose your self-respect.
Alcohol can hurt those around you.
Give yourself the best chance in life.
Drugs can destroy your health.
Drugs can make you lose your job.
Let's stand up against alcohol abuse.
Drugs can destroy every part of your life.
Look out for each other. Let's stand up against drugs.
There's a lot of corruption there. What are you doing with that?
The word corruption is actually misplaced.
Any elements of corruption must be rooted out and punished accordingly.
SASCO is denying that there's any evidence of such.
We've heard the allegations about students not assisting the situation.
Why do you have to be pressurized to do your job, Mr. Msulu?
We spend everything that we get given by government.
It's an excuse.
Who's failing you at government?
Who's failing us at government?
Who's not heeding your call?
The government is the government.
Is Dr. Blade Nzimande doing well?
With what he has done, we want him to do more. We want him to deliver more.
So he's failing.
The Minister of Higher Education, don't put words in my mouth.
Watch Question Time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News Channel.
Eskom could miss a deadline for a crucial step towards turning on the Medupi power station. But the power utility says it will probably meet the December the 24th deadline.
We're looking good. We've come through 3 days, obviously, of load shedding, which has unfortunately been necessary, but it's been useful to have built up our reserves for the coming week.
Shares of private hospital group Netcare jumped up today and closed on a high after the company reported increased annual profits.
The hospital group is also taking steps to aggressively reduce its dependence on Eskom due to increasing power outages and rising costs.
We'll be reducing our energy needs by some 35% over the next 10 years, and our cumulative savings of our forecast electricity bill will be in the region of R1 billion. So we're doing something very constructive about the challenges we're facing at the moment.
That's business news, weekdays at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
Zweleka Mandela is one of the Mandela granddaughters. Raised by her grandmother Winnie Mandela, born to Zinzi Mandela, she had a life that she now uses as a tale to change the lives of others.
I grew up with my brother, who was 3 years younger than me. At that time, being born into my family and in that era, I grew up with in a household my grandmother used to call a transit camp, because we lived with a lot of men and women who were affiliated to the struggle. So there was a lot going on.
Zweleka Mandela went through more than one can think of. Growing up closely with a brother in Swaziland, she had a childhood that seemed normal from the outside look.
When I moved from living with my aunt in Swaziland, because my parents were also very young and involved with the struggle, I then was moved to exile where my grandmother was. And one of my fondest memories was she used to sell acha in yellow buckets to the community. And I used to sit in the kitchen and literally eat acha from the bucket.
Having her first drink at a tender age, she thereafter started experimenting with other drugs.
I had my first drink at the age of 9. The trauma of it all wasn't enough to stop me from drinking. And it was by the age of 13 now, I was already quite a heavy drinker, and I used to black out. By the age of 13, it wasn't now just the alcohol, it was now the drugs. And so I used to actually steal marijuana to smoke it. And then well into my teenage years, I then began experimenting with more drugs. Up until the age of about 20, when I then developed an addiction to cocaine for about 10 years of my life.
She fell pregnant at 17. When she was 22, she had a second child. On attempt to having a third child, her infant baby passed on 2 days after his birth.
What hurts me the most is, not being a mother that my kids deserve. The 10 days before my daughter passed away, I had been using, and I tried to burn myself alive. Soon after that, fortunately at the time I was at my mother's house, and unfortunately my kids were in the next bedroom, and I was trying to do this, trying to take my life. And my daughter was, I remember coming in and out of my room, in her room where I was placed by my brother, and, coming to tell me that she's coming to take care of me, because she knows I'm not okay, and that, she was going to be my mother, because, I needed help, and, and home was no longer a safe place. And my mom then suggested that they go and stay with my aunt. For some reason, I never thought I would ever be living with the reality of the fact that I would never see her again.
Losing her firstborn daughter Zenani to a car accident, Zolega was left empty and remorseful.
10 days whilst I was in hospital. In those 10 days, I missed her 13th birthday. And I remember she was quite upset when I called her, because I had missed her birthday, and I think I'd sent her a message that my mother read to her to say that I was really sorry that I was missing her 13th birthday, but that we were going to do whatever she wants to do when I come out. And then on the 10th day of my stay in hospital, my father and my aunt and my brother came in to tell me that she had been killed in a drunk driving accident. And
making things right, Zolega now understands being a good parent to her children.
I think good parenting is a lot of things, and for me, one is being there for your kids. And I remember going into rehab 2 months after my daughter passed away. I checked myself into rehab. And I remember the one thing I battled so much with when I was there was my addiction counselor telling me, you weren't there for your children. And I was like, but I was. Like, I used to, I would try and make it home in time for them to wake up, do the whole putting on the uniform, and when they, do homework with my daughter, and then when she sleeps, and then I resume to, abusing the drugs and the alcohol. And I was like, but I was there. But he was like, no. You may have been there physically, but you weren't there emotionally. I don't think it would have happened the way it happened had I been a sober and a clean mother.
In her darkest days, Zolega found comfort in her grandparents who always knew just what to say to make sense of the life that lacked hope and joy.
After Zenani passed away, my grandfather said to me that, I remember he was like, you're not the only person to have lost a child, and, he had lost a child as well. And he was like, I've lost a child, and there's so many women who've lost children, but the reason why it's happening to you is so that you can be an inspiration to other women. And so I think that kind of comforts me. It's unfortunate that I've had to go through all that, but I don't feel sorry for myself, but I think I'm more comforted, and I'm just, more blessed because I know that I've been able to, help so many other people. I remember being so scared because, I had lost my aunt to breast cancer, my father's older sister. And to me, I was like, okay, how's that, the irony of it all? You know, I've been suicidal all throughout my teenage years, and now, you know, I don't want to die. Now I'm being told I'm going to die, because to me, breast cancer was a death sentence.
She completed her chemo on the 24th of April 2013 and was given a clean bill of health by an oncologist, and a month later, she conceived her now 5-month-old daughter.
I was in the comfort of my family and my loved ones, so that made it all the more easier. The side effects were unbearable. It wasn't so much, yes, I was upset by the fact that I was losing my hair, but I think what upset me more, like we were speaking earlier, was, you know, the loss of my breast, and then it was the chemotherapy may affect your fertility.
Zoleka describes her new relationship as a miracle and her fiancé as the man she needs in the new chapter of her life.
I am in a better place in my life, having him in my life. And you know, my aunt and my partner Terry have, I think, helped me try and find my way back to God. And so I'm always appreciative of that. Terry has taught me how to pray again. And I think he's also just taught me to believe again. It's never too late to rewrite your life story, because it's not. What my grandparents have taught me, and that is, you know, that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what you've done, that you still have and always will have the power in you to make a difference in somebody else's life.
There's a lot of corruption there. What are you doing with that?
The word corruption is actually misplaced.
Any elements of corruption must be rooted out and punished accordingly.
SASCO is denying that there's any evidence of such.
We've heard the allegations about students not assisting the situation.
Why do you have to be pressurized to do your job, Mr. Msulu?
We spend everything that we get given.